Welcome back to Solo Marvel Champion. Today I am doing my review of Mutant Genesis. Now I realize this is late. This campaign came out September 30th of 2022. I have played it 4 times since then, and all 4 of those times came this year, 2023. In fact, 3 of those have come since Next Evolution came out in August of 2023, so it is pretty top of mind. In this video, I'm going to start with a general overview of the campaign system, and I do want to go ahead and say that everything I mention is going to come from the point of view of True Solo and Standard. Following that, I'm going to go into each scenario briefly, talking about difficulty and fun, and this is 100% subjective. What I find difficult, you might find easy, and what I find fun, you might think is trash. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. I think you should always be playing these scenarios and campaigns yourself to make up your own opinions anyway, and not just listen to what people on YouTube and Facebook say. I also need to mention that there are going to be spoilers when I'm talking about individual scenarios, so if you want to have a blind run, click away and go ahead and do that, and then come back after your blind run. At the end, I'm going to give a summary and some general campaign thoughts. Alright, first let's talk about the campaign system for this campaign, which includes role building and the Future Past encounter set. Each player begins the campaign by choosing one of 4 roles: Brawler, Commander, Defender, and Peacekeeper. Each of these gives you access to an event and upgrade from certain aspects which are independent of your chosen aspect. This can be huge, as it allows off-aspect shenanigans like getting Make the Call while playing Aggression. Each also gives you a conditional access to random, emphasis on random, helpful upgrades tied to that role at the start of each scenario, and there is a little bit of overlap in these cards between roles. Each scenario in the campaign puts a side scheme into play, which typically has a detrimental icon, but not always. Clearing these side schemes will flip it over and become useful. Mostly, there is one that doesn't, and I'll get to that later. And at the same time, shuffle a random Future Past card into the encounter deck. Some of these are worse than others. A couple of them are beefy minions, a couple are not overly difficult side schemes, and there is one really bad attachment. But all of them go to the victory display when defeated, which will remove them from the campaign. I love this because it provides an interesting decision point. Do I go ahead and win this scenario, or do I stall and try to dig out those Future Past cards so I can remove them from future games? Alright, before getting into each scenario, I want to explain how I'm rating them. I'm going to rate each scenario with a difficulty from 1 to 5, which is a 100% subjective measure of the difficulty on a blind play and without any kind of campaign planning. Note that while you can change your aspect and cards between scenarios, you cannot change your hero or role, and this leads to planning, and I will talk about that again later as well. Difficulty modifier is what that knowledge of the scenario brings to the table, both for strategy and planning, but also sometimes it will include the campaign rewards. Final difficulty is the sum of these numbers, and will speak to the overall campaign difficulty when I get to the end. Scenario fun is a 100% subjective rating between 1 and 5 of the fun I have with this scenario. Campaign fun I'll explain and talk about at the end. Alright, so let's look at Sabretooth. I give him an initial difficulty of 4. He has the Mystique encounter set, which really sucks because she's basically a guard, and the set can gum up your draws. He heals after activating and can get multiple activations, and oh yeah, you have to protect Senator Kelly while this is happening. However, I do modify that down 3, giving it a total difficulty of 1, because he's not steady or stalwart, so stun strats can work well against him because he only heals after activating. Burst damage will help you outpace his healing. If you deal 6 and he heals 2, you're +4 on damage. Finally, if you're playing Rush and hope to beat him in 3 to 4 turns, you don't even have to worry about Senator Kelly. As far as fun goes, I only give Sabretooth a 1. For me, fun isn't about difficulty, it's about frustration. And it can be very frustrating to deal 6 damage and have him attack, then heal 3, and then get to attack again and heal 3 more. Now, that's definitely part of the game, I understand that, but that's why I'm talking about it in terms of fun rather than difficulty, because something can be difficult and fun, but not if it's frustrating, for me anyway. I give Project Wideawake a difficulty of 4 as well. Sentinel hits fairly hard, he has decent health with toughness, and then gets a steady on stage 2. He has a load of schemes in play at the beginning of this scenario, one of which is Zero Tolerance. It's a permanent which shuts down chump blocking with a loss condition. Now, I give this one -3 to difficulty also because, knowing this going in, just don't chump block. You can still lose cards to Zero Tolerance, but don't do Sentinel's work for him by chump blocking. Also, just play Justice. Playing Justice will help you clear those initial side schemes quickly. It also gives you access to 3 copies of one way or another, so you can grab more Abduction Protocols, drawing 3 cards each time. Clearing those Abduction Protocols is going to rescue powerful 2-cost basic X-Men allies and put them into play for you. You don't even have to pay for them. At the end of the scenario, each one of these you rescue are added to your deck for the rest of the campaign. Not only that, there are 2 allies which don't even take up ally slots. Jubilee and Magneto are part of this scenario, and you gain them by clearing off side schemes. Magneto has a 2/3 stat line with 5 health, and after he defeats a Sentinel minion, he heals the damage. Jubilee can stay with you for the entire campaign as long as she doesn't get defeated. That's a free thwart of 1 or tough ping at the beginning of every scenario. So if you're playing Justice, it's pretty easy to have 5 allies in play doing the work for you. I rate Project Wideawake 3 for fun because just like Collector 1, it changes the way you play the game. And if you've been watching my channel long enough, you know I love Collector 1. I give Master Mold a 3 out of 5 for difficulty, which is right in the middle. He's stalwart, has toughness, and starts with a Sentinel minion in play. Sentinel minions gain guard, which is tough. And I actually think the biggest difficulty here is his scheming. He doesn't get a boost card when he schemes, but he does get a Sentinel minion when he schemes, and of course, they have guard. The only upside here is that it puts them into play rather than revealing them. Now, this can prevent you from flipping down to Alter Ego because you could end up chaining into an additional Sentinel if the main pops. Now, I am going to give him a -2 difficulty, taking him down again to only 1 difficulty. The big thing I think is you start with Magneto in play and probably Jubilee as well. The campaign side scheme captures an ally, but you get to choose that ally, allowing for strategic choice. There is a quote-unquote proper order to the first turn or 2 in this scenario. You want to thwart that campaign side scheme first because it gives you a rescue mission, then defeat the Sentinel minion which started in play. That triggers the mission's response, which lets you pay a resource from hand and put that ally into play. So it is pretty easy to have 3 allies in play very early, 2 of which don't even take up an ally slot. That means it's not overly difficult to knock out those Sentinel minions with guard when they come up. For fun, I give this one a 2. I don't hate playing it, but I'm not really excited to play it either. Mansion Attack also has a difficulty of 4 for me. You start with 2 random villains with forced responses on attack, and they have toughness. The villains also appear as minions in this scenario with that same forced response. Main schemes come out in a random order with varying global effects which help or harm all characters. The campaign side scheme for this one has a hazard icon, and you want to get rid of that quickly because you're also dealt a face down encounter card when the scenario begins. This one also has the Mystique encounter set, and I talked about how bad that is in Sabretooth. It's difficult, but I think it's actually harder to remember those global effects than playing the scenario because I forget them all the time. I do adjust this -2 for difficulty, bringing it down to 2. Again, you should have Jubilee on the table when it starts. One of the global effects actually helps you more than the enemy, that is +1 attack with Courtyard, because you should have more allies than they have enemies on the table. And planning ahead can basically negate 2 of the effects for the enemies. Going into this with Piercing or Ping nullifies Basketball Court's toughness on minions, but you still get the benefit with your allies. If you aren't running Stun or Confuse, you don't even have to worry about the Atrium Steady effect. This really only leaves 1 dicey effect, which is the Retaliate 1 on the Cafeteria. I give Mansion Attack a 4 for fun. It has incredible variability, giving you different setups each time, different villains, different mains. I love it. It's fun while also being difficult. I did talk earlier about the difference in difficult and frustrating. For me, this is the most fun scenario in this box, which is not what I said in a previous video, but more on that later. Finally, we come to Magneto. He also has a 4 in difficulty. He has toughness and a ton of HP. He has steady, but he'll lose it. He attacks with 2 and also gets a magnet counter after doing so. Those magnet counters can build up quickly and have bad effects. The campaign side scheme has a crisis icon and gives Magneto a permanent +1/+1 when defeated, getting him up to 3 scheme and 3 attack on stage 1. And he has 4 new M-type Sentinels. These are 2/2 minions with guard and 5 HP, which give Magneto a tough when defeated. I am going to drop the difficulty -2 again here though, because I think it really just comes down to rush and or stun. Either way, you need to thwart through 3 side schemes with 3 threat each to do that, because those schemes also govern how much damage he can take. Ideally, I like to beat him in 3 turns if I can, or 5 at the longest, or just keep him stunned so he can't attack. This limits his ability to add those counters, which give him great additional effects. It limits the number of boost cards he gets, some of which will add magnet counters and tough status cards. It also limits the number of encounter cards you get, which will hopefully mean you don't draw into an M-type Sentinel. Now, I give Mags a 1 for fun. I give him a 1 because even if you do everything right, you can still get M-type Sentinels every turn. He can still get magnet counters, which lead to extra effects, or tough statuses off of boost effects. In my favorite villain from each box video, I said that Magneto was my favorite from Mutant Genesis, but I think that was more nostalgia than actual fun, because he can be really frustrating. I feel like I must rush Magneto to win, and that makes it less fun because it reduces my options. And again, that's my subjective opinion based on experience. You might not feel like you need to rush, but I do. Alright, let's talk about this third column, which is campaign fun. There are 3 numbers here, and I will explain what they mean. The first is unfunness. For every scenario, after the first one, which has a 1 for fun, the campaign gets -1 fun. The reasoning for this is multiple unfun scenarios will lower the overall fun rating for me. The second is kind of the opposite. It is super fun. For every scenario with a 4 or 5 in fun, the campaign gets +1 fun. And that's really the opposite of unfunness. Multiple really fun scenarios equates to a higher campaign fun rating. The third number is fun added by the campaign structure. In this case, I give it a +1 for role building because access to off-aspect cards opens up my options, and that's a lot of fun. I also give the structure a +1 for the role upgrades. Getting a role upgrade which is super relevant to the current scenario is a lot of fun. It's like a bingo, really. Now, I also give this campaign -1 fun for the Future Past set because 3 out of the 5 cards are really bad for your game. But I give that point right back because when you defeat those cards, you remove them from the campaign. So that gives me a fun rating of 13, which is just a number, but higher is better, right? Well, there is one more rating which I haven't shown you yet, and that's my replay rating. This is a fun minus difficulty and is a rating about how likely I am to want to replay this campaign. 6 out of 10 is good, so yeah, I'll replay this one. So yeah, my 100% subjective review of Mutant Genesis is that it has 7 out of 9 difficulty while still being fun for me, and I'm pretty likely to replay it. I love the role-building aspects of the campaign because they allow for cross-aspect shenanigans, and when you get just the right role upgrade, it feels super good. Here's a quick rundown of what I think is optimal for Mutant Genesis. Choose an X-Men hero who is capable of burst damage or rushing, load up on X-Men allies and Utopia for those extra readies you'll get, rush Sabretooth so you don't have to worry about Senator Kelly, or at the very least outpace his healing, and have some allies ready to block for when you clear find the Senator. But he can take at least 1 hit for you, and he's a jerk, so let him. Bring justice to Project Wideawake and rescue as many captives as you can. Also, don't chump block. Bring piercing or ping to Master Mold, and don't forget the proper quote-unquote sequence to rescue your chosen captured ally. Play a lot of allies in Mansion Attack, bring piercing or ping, and do not bring stun or confuse. This negates 75% of the global effects on the main schemes. If you have a villain with an especially bad forced response, rush them down quickly. Finally, rush Magneto and stun him if you can, after he loses steady. You want him to get as few magnet counters as possible, as few boost effects as possible, and as few opportunities to draw into an M-type Sentinel. Of course, he can be beaten in a longer game, but the longer he sticks around, the harder the fight gets. For my closing thoughts, I really have two things to say. First, this campaign looked too difficult to enjoy when it first released, so I didn't even attempt it until a couple months before Next Evolution came out, and I think that was a mistake. I think regardless of perceived or actual difficulty, we should play a scenario or campaign to discover that for ourselves. I've actually come to love this campaign as much as Next Evolution, and while I doubt I'll play it as often as Next Ev, 18 plays and counting, I absolutely see myself playing it several more times. That leads to my second thought. I didn't really care about campaign play before Next Evolution. I'd play a campaign once, maybe twice, and then just play one-offs with those scenarios. But since Next Evolution, did I mention I've played that campaign 18 times? I've really begun to enjoy campaign play. Not on the level of Arkham Horror, but I have begun to enjoy it. Alright, that's my 100% subjective review of Mutant Genesis, for whatever it's worth. It would have been much different after the first run, and might be different after the 10th. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know your experiences with Mutant Genesis. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a marvelous day.